Matt, Leighton, Shawn Battle here. Welcome back to another real estate video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about agency relationships. So buyer, broker, designated representation, dual representation, everyone's least favorite representation. Some agents will try to tell you that you can save money with dual representation. We'll tell you why that's completely false. Coming up here, Shawn, how you doing? Opening day of spring of baseball.
Man, it's gorgeous outside. I wish I was there, except we're in here.
Yeah,
it's great.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
So I had something happen to me this week that's never happened before, and that is I wrote an offer on a property that I had never seen before. And it got accepted and it got ratified. That was the co-op I was telling you about.
Yeah, River Place.
Actually, I wrote a contract in 2015 for a townhouse that I hadn't seen that we got. Either way, the way it went down is the buyer was shown the coming soon property, and then he was like, yeah, I want to write it. And then the agent that showed him it was like, okay, I'm going to represent you. And then the buyer was like, well, hold on. Don't you work for the listing company? And the agent was like, yeah, I do. And he's like, whoa, wait a second. You're telling me that you're working for the listing company and then you want to represent me on the sale of the
That's the perfect thing. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so then he called me up and then we negotiated the deal and we got it done. So that leads us into today's topic, which is agency relationships. Because, Shawn, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of consumers, they don't even know the difference. It's not the consumer's fault. There is a lot of nuance that does go on, but our goal is to clear it up. I'm working with one buyer right now. I think she thinks I'm the listing agent for the property because she always is talking about like selling it. Oh, good luck selling it. I'm like, my only luck is you.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't buy it, like that's my luck.
It's amazing how you take it for granted. You think that these people know real estate because we've been doing this a long time. We do it every day. We just assume that people know how this all works. And to be honest, most of them don't, or a lot of them don't. So that's what we're here to clear up today. So we're going to start.
What do you want to start with? Dual?
I don't know.
I want to do dual.
All right,
I want to do dual and get it out of the way. So here's how it goes down. Someone, a listing agent is representing the seller. An unrepresented buyer comes to the open house and says, hey, I want to put in an offer. Can you represent me? The listing agent says, yes, I will be the dual agent in this transaction. I could even save you $2,000. I could give that money to you as a credit. They might say, oh, wow, that's awesome. They don't have to do that. But what happens with dual representation is now that agent no longer has the fiduciary interests of both parties. So you can say, oh yeah, we don't need a buyer's agent. You'll just represent us or you'll just do the transaction. I have yet to hear a good argument of why dual representation is a good thing. In some states, it's even illegal. So if you're representing the seller, how can you represent the buyer's best interest as well? It doesn't make any sense to me.
You can't. It's dual agency. I've done it a few times in the past. I don't do it any longer. I feel like let's just get you your representation. The thing that happens is a lot of times people feel slighted. And truthfully, when you're in that instance, you can't give advice to either party. You're just a go-between. And so I have to say, Matt, what do you want to write on the property? What's your value? Okay.
Well, what do you think
you want to write 3? I can't tell you what I think it's worth.
So
does that do you any good?
Yeah.
No.
You're essentially a paper pusher.
That's right.
One option would just be to do the non-agency agreement, where here in the Commonwealth, if Shawn is an unrepresented buyer, I might just say, hey, listen, I can write it up for you. I just need you to sign this agreement that says I'm the listing agent. Now, there's not that much value from the buyer's point of view. The only value would be if that agent is giving some of their commission back, which is tough to negotiate in anyways. So the dual agency agreement, from the agent standpoint, there's so much liability. Why would you ever want to be a dual agent?
Yeah, it gets you in bad situations. Like I said, I've done it in the past. It went okay, but you learn from your lessons and say, forget it. It's not worth it. It really is not worth it. And keep in mind that, with dual agency, there's a lot that can go wrong. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a fan of it anymore. We'll pass it along to him. Yeah. Keep in mind also, we're allowed to do what's called ministerial acts. So we can write contracts, we can do things like that, but you have to know that you're not represented by me.
The biggest point, we'll move on, but the biggest point from dual agency is if you see a sign in the yard that says Johnny Arlington is the realtor here, and you call them thinking you can get a better deal, you're going to have zero representation. That person is going to be representing the seller, and there's very little value. They might say, hey, I can give you $1,000 back, but you may be making like a $500,000 mistake buying the property.
Yep.
So, all right, let's move on from dual agency. What do we got next?
Designated agency.
Designated agency.
So designated agency is when somebody in the same company, another agent, Matt and I, we're in the same company. He can represent a buyer, I can represent a seller, and vice versa. That's a designated agency because it's under one, we work under one broker, one brokerage. So designated agency happens all of the time.
Right.
We keep our clients' information confidential. We represent that person and that person's interests. So, I mean, honestly, all the time. We've done it together before. So.
Confidentiality is huge. I just had a closing earlier this week, and my client was like, hey, don't you want to, like, take a picture? I'm like, we're in the closing table, like, you're signing legal documents. Like, I don't want to put anything out there, like, without prior consent. So, confidentiality is huge. And with designated representation, people are like, well, how often would it happen where you're representing the buyer and the seller is in your office? Well, our office, we're a small office, and we have 13 different offices from Frederick to Fredericksburg all across the Mid-Atlantic there. So it does happen, and I think you're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't do designated representation.
Yeah, I think I did probably 4 or 5 last year, which were designated
just in one
agency
year.
in 1 year. So, you know, especially when people are concentrating in certain areas and we know what's going to happen, and we have listings that are coming up that we're sharing with people in our office. It happens over and over again. It's okay. Don't be frightened by it. So yeah,
it's a non-issue.
Non-issue.
What's next?
Let's just go to the listing agreement.
Let's go to the listing agreement.
So the listing agreement is seller representation. So when I get a listing, keep in mind that we sign this listing agreement prior to showing the property to buyers. So everything is spelled out in that listing agreement, from commissions to commission splits between seller and buyer agent, between dual and designated agencies. So that's all spelled out, whether we are allowed to do dual agency, whether we're allowed to do designated agency. And that seller we have to check those boxes, and the seller has to sign off on each of those spots saying, I agree to this commission, I agree to designated agency, I agree to dual agency. So, and also variable rate commissions. So there could be that sort of thing in there. So the people that are coming to our open houses unrepresented, just know that everything is already in writing. So for you to say, oh, I'm going to get a deal, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are, because if for me to represent you, it's probably not going to happen because I'm not going to do dual agency, and I probably don't have that right. We could go back and amend the contract and say, all right, I'm allowed to do dual agency and you guys agree to it, but personally, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have my boy Matt here write the contract, represent that side.
So you said a couple words in there, variable rates. I think that's commonly misunderstood by real estate agents, actually, nonetheless consumers. So what is variable rate, and how in a multiple offer scenario could that affect the outcome of what offer is chosen?
So yeah, so if we put a variable rate in there and say with a dual agency or a designated agency, I will reduce the commission by X amount, right? Okay. So what that says is anybody else, say we're in a multiple contract situation and I'm representing a buyer, and I say, well, if I represent a buyer, I'll give X% back, or I'll reduce the seller's commission by X. That means my buyer then in that dual representation has an advantage over everybody else that's writing by a certain percentage.
That's huge.
So I have to disclose that then to every other agent that is writing in there and say, all right, they'll ask, is there a variable rate? If I say yes, then I have to tell them how much that is, and they have to try to beat that offer. So,
yeah, you have to absolutely disclose variable rate if you're the listing agent in Virginia. Now, I mean,
and honestly, I don't do it. I mean, I don't do a variable rate. So
You
Usually
don't you say you don't disclose. That's
no.
that's
I disclose if there is,
bold,
but usually I don't do a
pretty
variable
bold
rate.
admission.
Yeah.
But yeah, we always talk about, okay, how can you make the offer stronger? Contingencies, appraisal, financing. That's all nice and dandy, but if there's a variable rate commission there on the back end and an unrepresented buyer, has a 1% like advantage, are you kidding me?
It's huge. Yeah.
They're gonna win every time. So maybe that's a key question to ask if you're in. I mean, people's not going to walk into an open house and say, "Hey, is there a variable rate commission?" No. But if you're in a multiple offer situation and you think that there might be a very close scenario, maybe ask about the variable rate to see if the listing agent, their brokerage, has some sort of commission structure. They have to disclose that here in Virginia.
Yeah, and the first question would be, are you representing a buyer as well in your listing? Do you have dual representation? Nowadays, though, that's all disclosed in the listing. It wasn't before, but now it's all disclosed in the listing. So me looking up a listing, I can see whether they have dual agency rights. And if they do, then you ask that question, hey, are you representing a buyer and is there a variable rate?
Yeah, and on the buyer agent, I had someone ask me, where do I find a buyer's agent? Where are I see real estate agents, where are the buyer's agents? Well, real estate agents are buyer's agents and they are listing agents. So a listing agent, just bringing it very elementary, just to start, listing agent, they're representing the seller, that the sign is in the yard. A buyer's agent is literally anyone else. It could be literally anyone. It could even be that same listing agent. I hope not, because of dual representation. But if you're asking yourself, well, where do I find a buyer's agent? Well, a buyer's agent is a type of real estate agent. I feel like I need to get that out of my...
Exactly. I mean, we're both listing agents and buyer's agents in different scenarios. So we'll represent buyers in certain scenarios and we represent sellers in certain scenarios. So if you're looking for a good buyer's agent, we are buyer's agents.
Yeah.
If you're going to an open house unrepresented, find a good buyer's agent. That's the thing. So that gets us into our last representation, which is buyer representation. So back in the day, we didn't have, actually back in like the 90s, everybody represented the seller. So they changed those laws now so that there is seller representation and there is buyer representation. So if you're going out and you're looking at open houses and you don't have representation, find representation. You're going to have to sign a document when you write a contract that says that you are represented by this agent. Right. Or really what the law says is you should have that document signed before this agent shows you any properties. So that's a buyer agreement. A buyer representation is when Matt, the buyer, and I go out, we have a signed document that says I represent him, not the seller. I'm going to every property, I'm going to show him every single property in the area and every property that is represented by any real estate agent out there. When it's on the MLS, I can show it. So I'm showing him everything. So the advantage to that is we're going out and seeing 15 properties, 10 properties, whatever it is, the first day they come on the market, so that we are in the advantage. When these people go into the open houses, they're at the disadvantage because we've already seen it, we've already written the contract. Now that person that without representation has to find representation, do all the stuff that we've already prepped him on doing. Yeah,
you have to already have that paperwork filled out before you write the contract. So most people have already done that. A lot of people haven't. And the first example of me, representing the buyer on the property I haven't seen before, well, the agent could be like, hey man, like I showed the property, I should get the commission. Well, who has the signed buyer broker agreement? Who do you think has it? I made the client sign the buyer broker agreement. The other, party, they didn't, he didn't sign anything. So when it comes down to it, you want one agent. I heard someone say, hey, I'm looking in 3 different areas. Should I get 3 different agents? Well, that's just going to muddy the waters even more. So you just want to streamline it and just have one specific buyer's agent.
That's right. I've been asked that so many times. Should I, you specialize in this area? I mean, we sell everywhere. Just because we talk about Arlington or Alexandria, I mean, we know the whole market in this area. We're licensed in different jurisdictions. So we can show you every property and we're going to do the research to get you the best deal in every market that there is.
Yeah.
So find one agent, stick with that agent, and let them work for you. That's what it's all about.
Right.
And stop going to open houses thinking you're going to get a deal. Get representation, get a document signed, let somebody show you some properties so that you can get in there timely, make a good decision, and win the contract.
Yeah.
Right?
I was watching this video the other day. It was talking about going into a Lexus dealer and going into a Kia dealer, and how like the services are different and the buyers are different. And the buyers at the Kia are like always asking for discounts, and the buyers at the Lexus are always seeing the value that they're getting, and they're no longer price sensitive. So don't be a Kia buyer. You got a nice maybe a listing coming up in DC.
Yeah, Adams Morgan,
Speaking
2-bedroom,
of
2-bath, jurisdictions with parking. So going to meet them tonight. Possibly another one coming up in Colonial Village, maybe another one in Station Square. So if you're looking at any of these spots, or you have any buyers, let me know.
Cool. Well, hopefully you learn a thing or two or three about real estate agency and dual agency and designated representation, and why you should not be using the listing agent to represent you on the purchase of your new property.
Yep.
For Shawn and myself, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.